What's up, you guys? Carlos Toro here. Fightful Boxing Podcast. Yeah, you know what time it is. It's time to talk some boxing. The new newsletter is out on Fightful.com. You can hit there for all the latest news in pro wrestling, MMA, and boxing. We're going to continue this little string that we have right here of special guest hosts on certain podcasts. And this time, I am joined by a new friend that I made over the last couple of weeks. We've been talking on Twitter a couple of times. I appeared on his podcast, Ring Walk, I believe it's called. John from Ring Walk, making his Fightful Boxing Podcast debut. John, how are you doing?
Carlos, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for the plug, and thanks for having me on. And we have enough to talk about, so that's for sure. So I'm excited to be on and let your guests listen in.
Yeah, and before we kind of get into all of it, where can people find you on Twitter and your podcast, which I do listen, I do recommend. It's a very, very nice listen.
Thank you for that. At Boxing Believer is the handle, and only because, damn it, the Twitter handle is already taken for the podcast name, which is The Ring Walk. And so if you're thinking about coming up to the fights, the anticipation of fights, etc., you're wanting to listen to a podcast, The Ring Walk is where you can find it. iTunes, Apple, Spreaker, all the different venues that there is for, podcasts nowadays. That's where you'll find us.
Yeah, and I have, and like I said, I appeared on his podcast not too long ago to discuss sort of preview Spence versus Garcia, and now that we got the fight, and I guess you could call it a fight, but it really was more of a one-sided beatdown. Errol Spence dominated Mikey Garcia, shut out on all three judges' scorecards, retaining his IBF welterweight title. I kind of already gave my general thoughts on the fight on a weekend recap podcast I did on Sunday night after the Michael Conlan fight on ESPN Plus. So most of you who want to listen more about my thoughts on that, you can go to that on the Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. But John, I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on the fight. We both predicted that Spence would win and that he would use his physical tools and advantages to get the win. And it turns out he used it to absolute perfection in this fight against Mikey Garcia.
Yeah, we both said that Spence was going to win. I don't think either of us thought that was what we were going to be seeing in a victory. We had both assumed that Mikey Garcia had the tools to probably get some rounds and was a good enough fighter. At least my take was that he was a good enough fighter to make it to the end. That I did not see him getting caught, and I also did not see him having the power to take out Spence. I was not anticipating an absolute whitewash. There was, and I said this on the podcast, I can't remember a time watching a fight, and it took me a while to think of a time where, for a pay-per-view, where guys were in the top 10 pound for pound, and how those scorecards were and how dominant of a fight that was. And I had to think back to when Mayweather was coming off a little bit retirement in 2009 against Juan Manuel Marquez, who was coming up at that point. Similar to this situation, and it was not even close. And the same held true for this last weekend. I can't say again that was something that I anticipated. This was not, though, because of size. And I feel like in some ways the narratives going into the fight were, this is a win-win for Mikey. This is a lose-lose for Errol, because if Errol wins, well, he's supposed to win. But Mikey has everything to gain from this because, he's moving up a couple of weight classes, and it just shows his heart and his balls. And probably the best thing to take from the fight, for me at least, was that we before, tried to write, journalists tried to write, people tried to predict, and fans came out on either this, it's going to be win-win or going to be lose-lose situation. And Spence was so dominant, he created his own narrative. He took a fight where he was supposed to, he'd look bad, and he'd look good, but if he won, it's not that big of a deal. And he looked so dominant that people are immediately throwing him higher up in, the top 10 pound for pound list, calling it one of the best performances of the last couple of years. And kudos to him. As much of a fan of his style that I am and his skill set, I didn't see that happening. I don't think there was anybody that was thinking that big of a dominance was going to be happening over the weekend. When we talked, you were still taking Spence, but you thought that Mikey would be a little bit more into the fight. You did not see it being that lopsided.
No, not at all. And I thought to myself that, maybe Mikey was a good enough boxer. And I thought throughout the entire fight that he was a good enough boxer to avoid getting taken out by Spence. And I didn't think Spence was going to knock out Mikey Garcia. I just didn't think that. But to say that Spence dominated is still a bit of an understatement because of the way he just asserted his dominance. And what really wasn't like from the opening bell. It was like, because the first couple of rounds was, both guys were finding their range. It was started like in round 3 where Spence kind of really took things to the next level. And and I'm just looking back at the fight, and I can count maybe 2 total minutes in which Mikey sort of looked like he belonged in the ring against Errol. But even then, it was just like, Mikey maybe only threw 3 or 4 really good combinations, and none of them even hurt Spence. What I was really surprised is how much Spence just kind of overwhelmed Mikey Garcia, and I said almost he outlanded Mikey 5-1 almost in the fight. And you kind of have your thoughts on, you went back to Mayweather coming out of that brief retirement. I kind of thought more recently with Guillermo Rigondeaux when he moved up to weight class to fight Vasily Lomachenko, and we all thought it was a similar narrative. It was kind of a lose situation for Lomachenko because people were saying, well, Lomachenko's expected to win. He's younger, he's much bigger, he has everything going for him, and Rigondeaux is just starting to get past his prime. He's smaller, and it turned out almost exactly the way we saw back then in 2017 as we did on Saturday. And I was really surprised. I don't know if you saw the ESPN pound for pound top 10 that got updated today. They put Spence, I believe, at number 4, above Triple G, above all these guys. I wouldn't say Spence is top 5. I think he's number 6 on my list, although you can make some argument that he's the top 5. But really, I think that, the narrative now is that Errol Spence could potentially be a real breakout star for Fox, because the reports coming in saying that it's 400 or at least potentially 400,000 buys, and everybody is starting to now look ahead towards Spence versus Pacquiao, and I think that's the fight you need to make moving forward. Capitalize on the momentum Spence just got, and Pacquiao is still Pacquiao. He's still going to be a solid draw. He's not as big a draw as he was back then in the early 2010s or in the late 2000s, but he's still, against Adrian Broner, he's still doing close to 400,000 buys. And if you pit Pacquiao against Spence, then that's a really solid pay-per-view. But it's looking like, you look at the post-fight interview, Pacquiao did not seem like he was interested at all. He was more interested in taking pictures with the fans. So what are your thoughts on potentially Spence versus Pacquiao next or down the line? Because knowing how the sport operates sometimes, even though that's the fight to make right now, it's not a guarantee that it's actually going to happen next.
Sure. Well, I dissect a couple of things that you talked on there. One, in regards to the pound for pound listing, if Errol Spence wants to be considered, in my book, a top 5 pound for pounder, which I find him falling out of, because while he is an undefeated welterweight champion with an amazing skill set, his signature win is not against somebody in his weight class, and that is his signature win. And there's going to be a lot of hype, and he definitely gets all the credit for being one of the best fighters in the world. But if you want to be a pound for pound great, it's right there in front of you. And no, not the narrative that's being pushed by Fox, which leads into the second portion of this. If he wants to be a top 10 pound for pounder, they figure out some way for him to fight Bud Crawford. Then you are having a true championship fight. That would be the fight that boxing fans would want to see. That would be the fight that would establish who is truly the best. That is a fight that you could look at historically and say, finally, we are getting what the welterweights that the generations before us had. You are having the 2 top welterweights go at. Now, that's not going to happen. because we live in an era where, for whatever reason, the lines are becoming more extreme in the sand, and Top Rank does not seem to do very well with others, and vice versa. So, looking at the fight that they're going to promote, Fox knows that they have a real star on their hands. Immediately post-fight, Richard Schaefer says what? He says the Mayweather era is over because of right? Of course, because they need to promote that. But then they're going back to the same well and saying, so he's going to fight Manny Pacquiao. If you want to establish something new and you want to create something new, that's fine. I do not think that Errol Spence is going to be your quote-unquote pay-per-view ticket. I think that this sold extremely well because of the storyline of Mikey Garcia coming up. 400,000 buys in today's market is good. It's funny enough, though, if we had said, hey, this fight got 400,000 buys and people were really excited about that 4 years ago, this would have been a bomb. But since streaming has been set up, differently, you can still make a fair amount of money off of that. Unfortunately,
and 400,000 buys in today's climate, that's like better than almost every UFC pay-per-view nowadays, which there's one every month, but almost none of them, except when you're John Jones, or Conor McGregor, you don't touch 400,000 buys.
Right.
So that's still 400,000 buys in today's climate. It is good.
Something. In today's climate, it is something. And I think that, of course, with a Manny Pacquiao fight, the name gets the casual fan, right? And the Pacquiao fans. For me, as a boxing fan, I just saw a guy get completely dominated by somebody faster than him and by somebody that establishes a jab. And I've already seen that happen to Manny Pacquiao when he was younger. And now you're going to be setting that up again. I personally think Manny should go out a la a good pay-per-view with Fox with Keith Thurman or something along those lines, where it's still going to draw a great amount of pay-per-view, but does one of two things. It doesn't kill the Pacquiao legacy. It doesn't end on a sour note, because Errol Spence is going to starch Manny Pacquiao with where he's at now, with his skill set. From what I've seen from Errol Spence, from what we know about Manny Pacquiao, I'm sorry, but that distance created that Spence can with that jab, and with what we found out is actually superior footwork, I don't want to see that fight. Me personally, I think that I'd much rather find a fight that's closer in line with Pacquiao's skill set. They were talking last night on Fox Sports. They do their show, and they had Errol Spence on, and he said, yeah, Manny Pacquiao is the one I want to fight. And then if Manny Pacquiao isn't going to happen, then I'm going to fight, our green leprechaun, Sean Porter. The problem with that is you just saw Sean Porter have a really hard time with Ugas. A lot of people thought that Ugas won, and we had talked on that last time.
Yeah.
And I don't, if you want boxing really to take off, it's the quality of the fight. Right? You got 400,000 people to buy into stories, but if you want 700,000 people to be buying in, or 1 million people to be buying in, you create the best fights, because the best fights generate the most excitement, and the best fights get people talking long after. The reason why they want a Wilder Fury fight so much wasn't because there was 500,000 people that watched the first time. It was because it was such a good fight, and now there's so much talk. And if you could create that, which boxing has such a hard time, but if they could create that with Crawford, that's the fight that I would really want to see. If you're asking me, I don't want to see Manny Pacquiao go out on his sword. I'd much rather have him a good, farewell fight. I'll pay for the pay-per-view, say thanks for the memories, and let Errol Spence continue to move his way up instead of treading water. Because he's not going to be the guy that is brash and outspoken and building up pay-per-views. That's not going to be him. He needs to do it with his gloves. And the way that he could show a truly dominant top pound for pound, performance would be up against the other guy that's in the top 5 of the pound for pound list across the board, and that's Terrence.
Yeah, and listen, I totally agree. I really want to see Pacquiao fight Thurman next, for a couple of reasons, and one particular reason that I really want most of all, not even looking at the fight, I just don't want to see 2 WBA welterweight champions, because listen, I just want this whole dumb, stupid WBA multiple champions in one weight class narrative to be done with, because the WBA kept saying, "Oh, we're going to reduce the number of championships," even though we're just adding this dumb gold title, which is not an interim title, but it's like but if you're the champion, you're not in the rankings, so it's almost like you're a world champion. It makes no sense. So obviously, Keith Thurman holds the super title, Pacquiao holds the regular title. Just make them fight, just to make one undisputed WBA champion. And you know what? And you also bring up a really good point, is the fact that as good as Pacquiao has sort of looked in his last two fights, it is against a retiring Lucas Matisse and an apathetic Adrian Broner, who still should be drug tested for thinking he actually won the fight, when literally no one in the world thought Broner won that fight. Pacquiao is still past his prime. He couldn't knock out Jeff Horn when in his prime. He would have easily taken him out in 7-8 rounds. And we've seen him kind of go back a step, then make 2 steps forward, then another step back. And at this point, Pacquiao is at the end of his career in a fight against Thurman, who is still not 100% in the ring as he showed against Josecito Lopez. He's still not back to form when he beat Sean Porter and Danny Garcia in the past. And it was Sean Porter. He was telling me, listen, I look at Keith Thurman in that fight against Josecito Lopez. I saw maybe 50% of what Keith Thurman was at in his prime. So Thurman versus Pacquiao is still a very attractive pay-per-view fight, because I don't think people realize this, but Thurman is a very solid TV draw. The fight against Garcia,
it might be the thing that could bring him out to fight another time this year. He is, that his work ethic with his calendar and setting fights is very slow. And so if the PBC was smart, you would think that they would try to utilize that they have this Porter and Spence fight, and maybe get the other fighter that they have, in their, stables, to have another fight this year. And it happened to be a mega pay-per-view, and one that's actually going to be competitive, because as you noted, Manny, they've been very smart with the way that they've been able to pull out 5 or 6 more paydays for him in his career, after he could have been done at a couple of different points. I love him. He's still showing amazing footwork, and he is beaten up on guys that have a lesser skill set than he does at 40 years old. It speaks the testament of the guy. He's wonderful. I think him versus Thurman is a toss-up fight, and that would be a lot of fun to see. But keep Spence along a path of true superstardom, or unless you really, unless that's what Spence is really most cared about, is getting that pay-per-view right now, just that payday, and pushing other things down the road. And that tends to be the way that it works in boxing. We don't always get the best bouts. We get the ones that might just make the most money for the time being.
Well, speaking of fights that we may not necessarily be wanting to see immediately, Deontay Wilder, it's been announced, we knew for a long time he's going to face Dominic Breazeale, and it was made official earlier this week on Tuesday in a press conference in New York. We all knew it was going to be at the Barclays Center on May 18th. The one thing that was a bit of a mystery was what network was going to carry it. And I think a lot of people expected this to be a pay-per-view bout, because they thought, listen, Wilder's going to probably be wanting a lot of money. And are you really going to get a lot of money just from TV for fighting Dominic Breazeale, as fun as he is? And it turns out, yes, Showtime, not Fox, which is probably even more surprising, is the one that's going to be carrying this fight. And it's, obviously Showtime's schedule has diminished significantly, because PBC is prioritizing Fox more than Showtime, and as you should, because Fox is the bigger network. But yeah, this is, it means we're not getting a Tyson Fury fight until later this year, if it does happen. Now there's going to be this whole seesaw of potential negotiations between Wilder and Showtime, and assuming Wilder signs with Showtime, and it could very realistically happen after this fight, it now pushes back the fights that we want to see at heavyweight, because now all the 3 stars have their own networks. Wilder's on Showtime, Josh is on DAZN, Fury's on ESPN, and I still believe that if those fights are going to happen between each other, it's going to take Wilder to sort of get a bit of an out clause with Showtime, maybe not necessarily end the deal, but let Showtime lets Deontay Wilder go to ESPN or go to DAZN just to be able to make those fights happen. And overall, I don't think this is great for the sport, because we have literally for years we've been under the impression, oh, we're gonna get Wilder versus Joshua soon. Don't worry about it. It's a question of when it's gonna happen. And at this point, I don't think it's a question of when. I think it's now a question of if it's ever going to happen. And if I were a betting man, if I were to parlay $1,000 on if we're gonna see Wilder versus Joshua, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think I would bet on the fight ever happening, because we've been led down this road for years, and I just don't think that either side is really all that content with not fighting each other. I think they're happy with the money they're going to make, and it's really a shame that the sport has now gone to the point where if the network offers you the most amount of money, you'll just go there, and then the best fights, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, well, I'm still getting paid.
Sure. There's a few things to take from the Deontay information. At first, when I saw this potential contract that Shelley had brought to him, where you're looking at a 3 to 4 fight deal, $100 to $120 million. That's the rumors, right? And then as more information comes out, 2 fights with Joshua, 1 in the United States. Oh, I mean, there's you and I are looking at that and saying that's generational money. And you're getting the opportunity that you guys have all spoken on, that there's the Joshua fights. And so at first, when he doesn't take this, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, dude, he just doesn't want to fight Anthony Joshua then, because he has all the money in the world and he has the fights. So no, he must be, and it's been a popular narrative on social media, he's ducking them. I take a step back though, and Steven Espinoza of Showtime was talking about this. There was a day and age and time when the mega fight that needed to happen would come without saying, okay, we'll give you the mega fight, but you also have to fight 4 other fights, all on our network, to get this one fight. That has been something, as far as a negotiation tool, that really has only come about recently with the big shifts to subscription services, right? All of a sudden, I'm signing 5-fight deals and 10-fight deals and these mega millions of dollars. The hundreds of millions of dollars is incredibly appealing, obviously, for these fighters. But if you're talking about a heavyweight fight, and this is, I'm sure, what Al Heyman has been putting in the ear of Anthony Joshua, if you're talking about a heavyweight championship pay-per-view, that could do 1 million buys, which would be their expectation. And if anybody knows about million pay-per-view buys and the financial benefits of it, it would be Al Heyman, who was working in the corner of Mayweather for a while. There's a lot more than just 40 or 50 million in a fight that he could make off of that. And so Wilder is doing what a lot of baseball players do. When they're on a team and their free agency is coming, the team will come to them and say, hey, we'll lock you down right now, guaranteed money, and you're going to be with us for X amount of years. And a lot of times baseball players say, you know what? I stand to make a bigger payday if I bet on myself. There's risk. He could go out there, catch one on the chin from Dominic and buy 100 million, and we're all going for the, there'll be a storyline for the future. Don't Wilder yourself, take the money. But if he comes out of the fight, like I think he will, I think he'll easily beat, Dominic Breazeale. He is the only one that really has flexibility. He's the one that says, hey, I can fight one fight. I don't know about your guy. I don't know about Tyson Fury, who signed for $100 million to ESPN for the next 5 fights. He can't go somewhere else. And we still don't know what Anthony Joshua's contract actually looks like, right? So truth be told, he's in a position where he has the power. And in his, in his interviews, in the interview that he had last night, he's really taking some of that power back and saying, okay, yeah, if you want me, that's fine, but we're going to set up one fight. One fight. I don't necessarily think that he is forcing the hand for it to be on Showtime, but he is being able to be the only one out of this group that can go where he wants, when he wants. And there is a certain amount of power that comes with that, because if you truly want him, he's the only one that can make that fight. Anthony Joshua is not fighting Tyson Fury. The DAZN is not dealing with Top Rank, period. That fight is not happening.
So, unless it's a first bet and Bob Arum just outbids Eddie Hearn like he did with the Maurice Alex Alcedo fight.
Sure. That bidding process is probably going to be a hell of a lot different, though, right? For the heavyweight championship of the world. And it'll be interesting to see. But the only way that this happens is they come back and they say, okay, we're scrapping this 4-fight, 3-fight, 4-fight guaranteed narrative that DAZN desperately needs to keep their subscription service model, and say, okay, 1 fight. And a 1-fight thing does not work on DAZN. It just really doesn't. The way that DAZN gets it is that they're saying they can guarantee X amount of fights down the line. That's why they have Triple G signed to a long contract. That's why they have Canelo signed to a long contract. That's why they're trying to sign fighters for a long period of time, to keep that subscription going so that people won't just drop it off because there's another fight coming soon. They need a lot of those. I just don't see, I do not see that fight happening there. I see it happening on a pay-per-view. I see Al Heyman having enough influence on Deontay Wilder saying, listen, bro, if we can get 1 million pay-per-view, which is what you would be getting if you had you versus Anthony Joshua for the heavyweight championship of the world, you're going to be making a lot more than $40 million. And then you're free to do whatever you want again and negotiate whatever contract you want again. And I think that's kind of his angle here.
And not just that, from the Showtime side, I think they're kind of betting on the fact that if push comes to shove and there is a bidding process between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, I think Showtime is very, and I don't think people realize this at the time, when Showtime got the rights to get the Dillian White fight a couple of months ago, and everybody was under the impression, oh, well, it's a Matchroom card, so obviously it's going to be on DAZN, and it turns out it's not the case. So now Showtime has demonstrated that they have the potential to steal a big fight or steal a top name from Matchroom and sort of try to get them on their network. Now, that's not to say Showtime's definitely going to get Anthony Joshua to come and fight on Deontay Wilder. That's still a humongous if. But now, as we kind of approach things, it's almost never a guarantee with certain fighters on Matchroom. And as you mentioned, we don't know what the contract looks like between Matchroom. I remember there was rumors, unsubstantiated rumors a couple of years ago that Anthony Joshua was going to be leaving Eddie Hearn because he was unhappy or his contract was running up. And
well, that's the thing we've not talked about at all. We do not know what Anthony Joshua's contract is. We know what Tyson Fury's is, right? Because that's big news and it's been out there. But we just kind of always assumed Anthony Joshua is with DAZN because DAZN came from Matchbook and Eddie Hearn, and so there must be a contract. But how long is he locked in? Does he have the freedom to go anywhere? Can Anthony Joshua go anywhere and fight wherever he wants to? We don't know that. That is not something that's readily out there and consumable for the media. So again, DAZN's offering up these fights. There was still a lot of people that were kind of wondering, wait, can DAZN actually offer Joshua contractually, to Wilder? And nobody's been able to really nail that down in stone. The only thing that we have heard is that this was the parameters of the deal. But does the parameters of that deal then change a contract that Joshua already has, or does Joshua get a new contract? Is Joshua signing a contract at the same time for another 4 fights? Because in Wilder's contract, they're saying that the next 2 fights after this one is Joshua. So what does his contract look like? And this is where I'm coming back to. The only free agent out there, the only guy that's free and clear, is Deontay Wilder as of now. And he's going to win this fight. And then we see what happens, after that. The real guy that I feel that is left out in the dark in all this is Tyson Fury, because I do not see any stable of heavyweights that is going to make that type of money for ESPN that Tyson Fury is going to fight. He's going to get, probably Pulev. And who else do they really have over there that's enticing on any level for him to fight? So it's a train wreck. The heavyweight, guess what? It's 2019, and the most corrupt, messed up division in boxing is still the heavyweight division.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're really quick on the Tyson Fury. I mean, like, Top Rank, all they got really is Kurapulaev. They no longer have Andy Ruiz, which actually could have been a decent first fight for Tyson Fury. Brian Jennings is coming off a loss to Oscar Rivas, and they can't guarantee Oscar Rivas because Oscar Rivas is not promoted by Top Rank. He's promoted by Mitchell Jim.
By them, yeah. So I that's the thing. They've got a 5-fight deal with him. They don't have even 5 fighters for him to fight. So it's that's going to be just a shit show. I do not know what Top Rank is going to do with that contract. And I don't know if they're regretting it or if they thought that they were going to be able to bring Deontay over, but that's just not the case so far.
Yeah, I mean, and the DAZN is also undergoing for its own turbulations. I mean, they today, a few hours ago, they announced that they are going to be raising their prices for new subscribers starting on March 25th from $9.99 to $19.99, and for us current subscribers, we can keep the $9.99 for until March 25th, 2020, and until then, we either pay the $19.99 a month or we pay a yearly sum of $99.99, which for those of you who don't want to do the math, it comes down to $8.33 a month, which is still well, for current subscriber, it's a decent deal. But the way I look at this is it tells me a couple of things. One,
yeah, I wanted to know.
Yeah, it tells me a couple of things. One, and we kind of already knew this, is the subscriber count is nowhere near what DAZN was hoping for at this stage of the game. They were hoping they were going to get a lot with the Canelo versus Rocky Fielding fight. Turns out, people who don't know who Rocky Fielding is, they didn't really tune in to watch that fight. And we kind of already knew that, not just from the reports, but if you kind of look back to the Triple G press conference, Chris Mannix was asking John Skipper, from 1 to 10, how happy are you with 10 being really happy, how happy are you with the subscriber count? And he never even, and John just said, well, I'm hoping I know we're going to get to a 10. And he completely deflected the question. And he said, and he didn't even stretch the truth in saying, oh, man, look, we got all these great stars. I mean, and we got, and our apps was trending real well on the iTunes store. So I'd say maybe 6, 7, kind of stretching the truth. And he can say that because we don't know what the actual number is. But he didn't even go as far to say that. He just said, I know we're going to get to a 10. So that kind of tells me that John Skipper looks at the subscriber count and thinks we're about a 2 or a 3 in terms of where we want to go. And not just that, I think DAZN is sort of starting to regret having to invest so much money. And that was my worry when this whole venture started, because I know that we were saying the owners of DAZN have like almost a limitless amount of money, but up to a certain point, even though you may have an almost endless pool of cash and you essentially just writing blank checks, to a certain point, you kind of want a return on investment, and paying $1 billion to Matchroom Boxing over the next 8 years and more than $300 million to Canelo Alvarez, not to mention deals with a lot of the other big stars that are on DAZN, Triple G, Sorum Bisai, all the other champions that are on, and all the other guys they signed co-promotional deals. Alexander Usyk. How much money are they actually spending over the next decade or so? Who to say DAZN isn't about to spend $2 billion on this venture? So that's why they're raising the prices, because they need to get as much money as they can in the short term, because they've been operating under this whole, you got to spend money to make money. But the problem is they're spending money and they're barely making any money at all.
Right. So when I look at what happened today, first off, as coming from a business place, they do have those types of investors that throw money in. When you are looking as these investors and the people that have put together this plan, this was obviously not something that they were going to be getting a return of investment on in the short term. The plan being getting the big stars, signing the big contracts, understanding the cost that would take, but signing these contracts so that we're not dumping this money on them right now. A lot of people get kind of messed up with these contracts that are getting tossed out right now. Canelo Alvarez hasn't made $360 million. There wasn't a check that was given to him. This is going to get paid out over his fights.
Yeah, that's for all the 11 fights or however many fights it's on the contract.
Right. So when we talk about this substantial amount of investment that's come, it's not in this calendar year. It's in years to come. Now, it might be over the next 2 or 3, like say in a deal like with Triple G or with DAZN, with Deontay Wilder, etc. But this is money to come. I do not believe that the fellas over there, now, would they like a higher number? I have heard estimates around 80 to 100,000 subscribers on a monthly basis for the United States. That's the rumored kind of number that they're at right now. Now, I don't think, I don't know, who knows what it actually is. The ESPN numbers have been floated out there at ESPN Plus at a much higher number, around 2 million. But you also have people consuming a variety of different sports. So putting them is not apples and apples. It's apples and zebras. It's completely different. The decision to change the rates, though, I absolutely understand. They needed enough of a basic membership growth without showing really any fights, just to to practice. They needed to go through all of it. They needed to build the app. They needed to run fights. They needed to bring on fighters. They needed to have something to bring people over, but they haven't had a mega fight on there yet. Rocky Fielding isn't that, and they're not going to risk Canelo this early. What I see today as is a way of them protecting their investment, understanding that the initial blowback right now might be difficult because people are just going to think $19.99 and say, man, I spent $6 more than Netflix for DAZN. I'm not going to do that. But if you take a step back, the idea behind DAZN was to kill the pay-per-view, right? So if you have numbers that they're looking at long term, they need to not have a high churn rate. A churn rate is when somebody signs up for a month and then drops off, signs up for a month and then drops off. That really kills your bottom line. So what DAZN wants is they want locked in members. So what DAZN is doing is they're saying, dude, actually, you're paying $9.99 right now, Carlos, but you can actually get it for $8.33. Just pay for the year, which a lot of boxing fans are going to keep that material for the year anyway. What they're not going to do is lose on the back end with churn rate, where people are signing up for a month for $9.99 to get, Canelo Triple G or a heavyweight championship of the world, or watching Usyk rise through the heavyweights, next year. They're not going to put themselves in a position where they're going to lose. They're saying, okay, well, if you're going to do that and you're going to sign up for a month, it's $19.99, which is still way less than any pay-per-view, and you're getting a month's worth of content. So I can understand the frustration from fans going, oh, see, you said $9.99 and now it's $19.99, etc. But truth be told, if you're paying $9.99 a month, you've already been doing it for 5 or 6 months now. You're going to probably do it for the next 6 months. You drop the $100 at the beginning of the year, it's $8.33, like you said, for all our mathematicians here watching. And DAZN sets themselves up where they don't have as high of a churn rate. They can show that they've got all these massive fights coming up. And for people that want to drop in, it's $20. That's gonna be a model that's much more financially secure that they can show their investors. That's something that they can, kind of bank on a little bit more, and I think is more feasible for, your casual fans. They can still pop in and get a fight for $20 and content for a month and hopefully get hooked, and then sign up for a year. And that helps their churn rate. So I understand the financial side of it for DAZN. I don't necessarily think that it's because they've struck out. I just don't think that there's other content. The other content that they have on the app can really, quantify a large subscription number base. They've had, a couple of fights, not anything that really draws you up out of your seat. Not that's going to grab the casual, fan to spend that much money each month. With the big fights coming, they just want to secure themselves and say, okay, if somebody's going to come in on Cinco de Mayo and then drop off, we're going to get double the money for it. We're not going to just say $9.99 and then you can quit, and I think that's where they're going with that moving forward.
Yeah, and you bring up ESPN Plus, and I do agree with you. It is an apples to oranges type of situation. And one thing that I think people aren't realizing is the fact that, yes, the $19.99 number is kind of scary, and DAZN recognizes that, but you're still only paying $19.99 for the Canelo fight, it's not like you're getting a subscription and then you're paying extra, which is what ESPN Plus is doing with UFC. It's like you need to get a ESPN Plus the subscription just in order to buy the pay-per-views, because ESPN really wants to get those subscription numbers as high as possible. But that also means you're still, instead of increasing the monthly price for, like, say, just like a UFC package on ESPN Plus, you're still paying $65. Just that they're kind of lowering the pay-per-view price to sort of offset the ESPN Plus subscription. But at the end of the day, that's still $65 coming out of your pocket for, like, monthly pay-per-view. And in this case, I do think that financially it does make sense. And not only that, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the timing of the date of the new price, March 25th, I thought was really interesting, because if you pay the $19.99, that puts you over to April 25th. And you know what's on April 26th? The Shinsuke Sorum Visai Juan Francisco Estrada card. So now they're not just looking towards the Canelo fight, they're looking towards that April fight. And it may not be the popular fight amongst mainstream boxing fans, but to hardcore boxing fans, that is a phenomenal card with a fantastic main event. And I can see DAZN saying, all right, let's just get the ball rolling. Let's try to get the $19.99 out of the subscribers for this fight card at the Forum, where hardcore boxing fans are absolutely salivating, because that's been a rematch that's been 15 months in the making. And so now you're kind of starting to see the DAZN schedule starting to look really good, as they're now starting to not just get the fighter, but properly building up to those fights. And I think we're getting to, and I think $19.99 is not a terrible number again, and it's for the new subscribers. And you're not paying for $19.99 for individual fights. You're getting the subscription, which has a ton of other programming.
And it's $19.99, but if you want to do the $19.99, and if you like what you see, which is what DAZN is banking on, and you know that fight is a day away, and instead of re-upping at $19.99, where you've already spent $40, 40% of the cost, sign up for $8.33. If I'm telling you, as a casual boxing fan, here's your three options. This calendar year, you are going to buy on pay-per-view 3 to 4 pay-per-view cards on Fox/Showtime, if you will, for the PBC. So you're going to be spending around $300, okay, to get those 4 fights, those big 4 cards. Or you can spend $60 for monthly subscriptions with ESPN Plus, but then they're probably also going to have 3 pay-per-views. So you're going to do 60, but you're also going to be probably dropping another 225. So you had 300, 400 for Fox, and you had about 225 to 250 for ESPN. Or you can spend $100 up front and get almost a card every month. You're getting 12 fights, and you're big, probably good size fights, probably 5, pay-per-view worthy fights on DAZN, and you're spending $8.33. See, if I put it to you that way, of course, you're going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to take the DAZN route. I think people, they get frustrated because they said, well, you told me $9.99. Well, actually, it can be less. They want to secure their churn rate. That's all that it is. And I think people will find out that come April 20th, there's going to be a lot of ESPN Plus people that didn't understand, wait, now I have to pay pay-per-view as well. And that's where it's going to really catch them that maybe this DAZN product is not as bad as the original scare of the bump in price was going to be. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, there's a lot of money involved, and for me personally, I think that it makes sense what DAZN is doing, and they're aligning themselves just to secure their financial backers that everything's going to be okay for the next couple of years.
Totally agree with a lot of points that you make, and I do think overall I do still like the DAZN deal a lot more, because I don't think people really understand that the DAZN cards for the most part are very good, and you're getting for the most part the most amount of fights. So I do think that's a good deal for DAZN moving forward. And I'm not saying like I'm Team DAZN or saying that ESPN Plus or PBC is not good. I'm just saying that, like, dollars and cents, it still makes more sense to just, if you were to pick one, you get DAZN because you're still getting the two biggest stars in boxing for the next few years.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that about wraps it up for this edition. We certainly spoke a lot, but before we go, I did get a news alert. As we just started the podcast, but I didn't want to sort of break the flow of some of the topic we were discussing.
Okay, so this is on the fly. Okay, what's happening?
Officially announced, Jared Hurd defending his IBF and WBA junior middleweight titles against Julian Williams. It's gonna be on Fox May 11th in Fairfax, Virginia. And they also actually announced a couple of undercard fights. Mario Barrios against Juan Jose Velasco in the co-feature, and Matt Korobov goes against Emmanuel Alim in the opening fight. So decent card, not spectacular, but it's a decent Fox card.
It's a smart enough card. You've already seen what ESPN has done, putting out. Fox has done. Fox is doing a really good job combating. All the networks are combating and showing counter programming. Right. So on April 20th, ESPN has a card that's going to be out. On Cinco de Mayo that weekend, you have the Danny Garcia fight that's going to be on Fox to, counter the Canelo Jacobs fight. And
the Garcia fight's on April 20th. The May 4th is the Kura. Is the heavyweight fight.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, the kind of programming that's going on here. And yeah, that one dropping the next week on Fox makes sense. It's great because that would literally be, man, we're coming up on then like 6 weekends in a row of really good fights, and it'll be good for her to get back out there and have a dominant fight. And yeah, that sounds like a great card too. So I'll have to see exactly, do the breakdown on Williams, but that's a good fight, and that's great that it's happening right after the week before. You said it's on May 11th?
Yes, May 11th on Fox.
Yeah, that'll be great for Fox, coming off of, what will probably be a big weekend for DAZN. So they're setting up so smart how they're doing their programming and piecing things together and making sure that they keep redirecting the eyeballs of boxing fans from week to week. So that's interesting. That just broke. We had live breaking news. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you can only get that. You get that live feeling here on the Fightful Boxing Podcast, which drops every other Thursday. Same as the Fightful Boxing newsletter, which you can find on Fightful.com. Head on over to Fightful.com for all the latest news in pro wrestling, MMA, and boxing. On the Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel, I keep dropping interviews with some of the biggest names in boxing. Not that long ago, I spoke with Sean Porter. Extensive interview talking about him wanting to face Errol, Spence, Manny Pacquiao, Keith Thurman, potentially fighting on pay-per-view down the line, and lots of other names. Maurice Hooker, I spoke to him right before his fight against Michael Lapierre. So tons of content out there, not just for the boxing fans, but for MMA. Lots of interviews from the great James Lynch, and lots of podcasts out there recapping virtually every Bellator and UFC card. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up for officially this edition of the Fightful Boxing Podcast. John from Ring Walk, I do appreciate you coming on here. It was really fun, great stuff out there. Go check out the Ring Walk on virtually any place where you can find podcasts. John, once again, what's your social media handles, and where can people find your podcast?
Man, that was a lot of fun. Thanks to Fightful and to Carlos. And you can find me. You just search The Ring Walk, and you'll find that podcast, iTunes, Spotify, etc. And when you go on Twitter, it's at Boxing Believer. And yeah, let me know that where you came from and that you came from here. And love Talk Boxing on there.
All right, that about wraps it up. And again, you can also find me on Twitter at Carlos Toro 360. That's Carlos Toro 360. For some reason, some Joe Schmo still has Carlos Toro, even though he hasn't tweeted since literally 2009. So you can find me there on Twitter. Carlos Toro from FightfulBoxing.com. John from The Ring Walk, signing out.